To arms! Germany declares war.
Sons of France, Britain and Russia too, will fight for the right. We'll fight, fight to win, for Belgium, France and motherland, march on to Berlin.
Christmas in the trenches. It's been a cold, bleak time, whether on the Eastern Front or the Western Front. In this snow-covered, shell-torn landscape, it's been a strange kind of Christmas for all of us here, friend or foe, civilian or combatant. We all set off in high hopes in August to celebrate a swift victory in Berlin. Or as the Germans thought, in Paris, and then be home before the leaves fell, or anyway, by Christmas. Moltke, the chief of the German General Staff, had voiced belief in a brief cleansing war, and in May said, "We hope to be finished with France in 6 weeks." In the Russian General Headquarters, to keep down costs even of a swift war, economy-minded officers said that no new typewriters could be given out. For a short war, the old ones would do. They banned drink. Grand Duke Nicholas on the right, Commander-in-Chief, the Tsar's cousin, ordered religious ceremonies, orthodox fashion and very long, to be held every day. But the war has now reached stalemate. The Kaiser and his son's hopes for what they wanted for Christmas have been dashed. But so too of those of the Allies. It's been up to the troops, of course, to make the best of it. There have been rations of Christmas pudding and other Christmas cheer. The Germans even put up some Christmas trees by their trenches. And one eyewitness has reported that a German NCO started his fellows off in some marching tune. When they had done, I set the note for the boys of bonnie Scotland. And so we went on singing everything from Good King Wenceslas to O Lang Syne, which we all, English, Scots, Irish, Prussians, Württembergers, joined in. And during the ceasefire, some soldiers from both sides left their trenches to meet each other. A football match was reported between the Lancashire Fusiliers and a Saxon unit, and that the Fusiliers won 3-2. Such photographs have been heavily censored. It's rumoured that the high commands on both sides are appalled by these meetings, believing such fraternization is bad for morale. And morale is very important at this time, as a rather sour American socialist cartoon pointed out this month with Christmas cheer. Don't be discouraged. The doctor says you'll be back on the firing line in a week. But of course, we're all confident that once winter is over, a spring push will be possible. But just why hasn't there been a swift victory as most of the generals, on both sides, expected? As well as the men who rushed so eagerly to go off to war. What's gone wrong with the plans so carefully laid, we now know, over the past 10 years? All countries have planned for the wars they've felt most likely to happen. Germany, with her allies Austro-Hungary and Italy forming the Triple Alliance since 1882, had long feared threats on two fronts after France and Russia became allies in 1894, the two great powers most likely to be hostile to Germany. Count von Schlieffen, the German chief of staff at the time, drew up a secret war plan. He thought it would take Russia at least 6 weeks to get her armies ready in such a vast country, with far fewer railways than in Germany. The German forces would have that time to defeat France, relatively undisturbed by Russia. Yet the Franco-German border is short. It's also heavily fortified, so a direct attack across the border would probably fail. Schlieffen thought the answer was for German troops to go round the French northern flank, through neutral Belgium, Holland and Luxembourg. Here on the plains of Flanders, there'd be the space to maneuver the vast modern armies. Paris was to be encircled. In 6 weeks, the French army would be surrounded and destroyed. It was known that an attack via Belgium, whose neutrality was guaranteed by international treaty, might bring Britain into the war, as this recruiting poster indeed shows. But this risk had been discounted, because Britain was mainly a great naval power, as the sight of the fleet assembled ready for action at Scapa Flow on the eve of the war showed the world. The Germans also thought a naval blockade of her ports wouldn't have time to take effect in a short war. France's war plans were based on massive fortifications south of Verdun, along the border with Germany. The generals planned a swift, overwhelming attack into German territory, winning back their former provinces of Alsace and Lorraine, lost to Germany in 1871. This was called Plan 17. At the same time, there was to be a massive onslaught by France's ally, Russia, on Germany's eastern front. Great Britain's war plans have been limited by the smallness of her army, all volunteers, not conscripts like the rest of the great powers, and the needs of her vast overseas empire. The British assumed that an expeditionary force of about 100,000 well-trained men would give the French enough assistance to enable them to beat Germany, while the Navy held the seas, captured German colonies, and blockaded German ports. All these ideas on a short war were based on the lessons military experts thought they'd learned since the 1860s. As recently as last year and the year before, military attachés from the great powers were observers on the Balkan Wars battlefields. Unfortunately, although most of the wars were indeed short, apart from the American Civil War, they contained lessons which are only now really being understood. It had been thought that sheer weight of numbers, such as Russia's vast resources of manpower would provide, would carry the day. In August, the Daily Sketch said, "Russia's millions may turn the scale of battle." The firepower of the new improved weapons, it was thought, must bring about a swift victory. The French have believed, as their generals have always stressed, that success depends far more on forcefulness and tenacity than on tactical skill. The cavalry, above all, have been thought to be the most valuable tactical force. As a British officer has put it,
"We'd been training for 10 years nearly, or 9 years anyway, for the role of the cavalry was to push forward until we contacted the enemy."
Some have thought air power unnecessary, though in May Churchill sought support for the expansion of the Royal Naval Air Service. But most generals still think air reconnaissance will never replace reconnaissance by the cavalry. But victory hasn't come, despite the often incredible bravery of the fighting men on both sides. Censorship makes it impossible for us to see with the clarity that future historians will achieve the military mistakes which may have contributed to failure. Some things, however, do appear clearly through the fog of war. At first, the German onslaught was barely checked. The Schlieffen plan had been slightly altered by General Moltke, so the Dutch territory was avoided, and instead of just a token force in Lorraine on the French frontier, many more troops were sent there, which weakened the right wing of the German attack. But reality seemed to be the same as the war games and maneuvers. In the early days, the cavalry seemed indeed to be, as always, the most valued force on the battlefield, the elite of the fighting forces on both sides. At times, the Cycle Corps have seemed equally mobile and effective. But the cavalry have proved to be the first victim of the war. Modern guns and rifles seem, after all, too powerful for the effective use of cavalry in the traditional way, as the magazine Navy and Army Illustrated showed its readers in September. Some cavalrymen have tried camouflaging their horses by painting them khaki, though, as one of the men has pointed out.
But of course it didn't last long, because the first shower took a good deal of it off, and then the sweat of their various actions soon takes the colour off the horse.
The infantry, attacking across open land, have proved too easy a target for machine gunners. The French, for example, may look brave in their red and blue uniforms with bayonets shining, but their Plan 17 has been shot to pieces in bloody battles. Camouflage can help, but not in forward attacks. Nearly 20 years ago, a remarkable forecast of what the next war would be like was published by a Polish banker, Ivan Bloch. Listen to his words, look at the pictures of our war, and judge whether his fearful forecasts are coming true. This was to be a typical battle. The distance is 6,000 meters from the enemy. Shells tear up the soil and burst. In a short time, the crew of every gun has ascertained the distance of the enemy. Then every projectile discharged bursts in the air over the heads of the enemy, raining down hundreds of fragments and bullets on his position. Men and horses are overwhelmed by this rain of lead and iron. Now they are but 2,000 meters away. Already the rifle bullets whistle round and kill, each not only finding a victim, but penetrating files, ricocheting and striking again. The firing lines will advance one after the other. Battalions will march after battalions. Finally, the reserves will follow. Yet with all this movement in the two armies, there will be a belt 1,000 paces wide, separating them as by neutral territory, swept by the fire of both sides, a belt which no living being can stand for a moment. The ammunition will be almost exhausted. Millions of cartridges, thousands of shells will cover the soil. But the fire will continue until the empty ammunition cases are replaced with full. The moment will approach when half the combatants will be mowed down. Dead and wounded will lie in parallel rows, separated one from the other by that belt of 1,000 paces, which will be swept by a crossfire of shells, which no living being can pass. The battle will continue with ferocity, but still that 1,000 paces unchangingly separate the foes. Who shall have gained the victory? Neither. The railways have made it easy to mobilize men, horses and supplies. But once off the trains and dependent on human and animal muscle power, the strain soon tells. Massed armies with their horses need immense quantities of food and supplies. Each horse eats nearly 6 kilos of grain a day. Roads quickly become clogged. Men, horses, wagons, even refugees mill together. If there were no enemy, it would still be difficult to keep up a swift rate of progress for long. But of course, there was opposition, of a ferocity the Germans underestimated. The Belgians resisted strongly at Namur, the British at Mons. The French, hurled back in Lorraine, moved reserves northwards to the River Marne. Nevertheless, the crack German cavalry, the Uhlans, were only about 30 kilometers from Paris by the 2nd of September. Paris was bombed. The government moved out. Reinforcements were rushed to the front by taxi from Paris. The cost was as on the meter. But scarcely believing victory was possible, Moltke hesitated. He ordered his troops to drive the French southeast, away from Paris, abandoning the plan to seize the capital. On the right wing, General von Kluck simply made mistakes and turned too soon. The advance was halted. The German forces were held at the Battle of the Marne. But since October, a war of movement has come to an end. All attempts to outflank the enemy by either force have failed. Trenches now run from the Channel to Switzerland. The same problems seem to be emerging on the Russian front as well. After initial victories, the Russians have been driven back. With the trenches, Bloch's forecast again seems to be coming true. He said, "Certainly, everybody will be entrenched in the next war. The spade will be as indispensable to a soldier as his rifle. The first thing every man will have to do, if he cares for his life at all, will be to dig a hole in the ground and throw up as strong an earthen rampart as he can to shield him from the hail of bullets which will fill the air. It will be impossible for the battle of the future to be fought out rapidly. All digging work is slow work, and when you must dig a trench before you can make any advance, your progress is necessarily slow. Battles will last for days, and at the end, it is very doubtful whether any decisive victory can be gained." An objective observer looking at such scenes might think that all the powers should come to a conference table and seek an honorable peace. But would this be possible while German troops are entrenched in French and Belgian fields? Can the Germans, people or government, be satisfied with less than total victory? Have too many promises been made and too many lives already been lost for peace to be possible? If peace doesn't come soon, we still face great problems. How do we get out of stalemate? Should millions more men be sent, as Winston Churchill recently put it, to chew barbed wire in Flanders? Can mobility be restored? Can the combustion engine replace the horse? Will aeroplanes become the new cavalry? Can new weapons solve the problem? As the Daily Mirror has shown, the war of the big guns, British batteries that are changing the history of the world. Can new fronts be opened up, perhaps in the Balkans? Can the British Navy do more than blockade German ports? If the war continues for long, then all countries will face increasing hardship and economic difficulties. How will civilian populations respond? Will it be, as Mr. Bloch has said, that nothing will be demonstrated by the next war, if it is made, in spite of warnings, but the impossibility of making war, except, of course, for the purpose of self-destruction? War, therefore, has become impossible, except at the price of suicide. What the governments will all come to see soon, more or less clearly, is that if they persist in squandering the resources of their people, they will only be preparing the triumph of the socialist revolution. Will even 1915 see the end of it all?